Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of What's Hot with Sea of Tranquility. We got in the co-captain's chair once again, Carl Sederholm. I'm thinking he's this way. There we go. I think I got that right
I'm
this
here
time.
somewhere. Hello.
He's here somewhere. Carl's back again. We've got another episode where Carl is going to talk about some really cool new extreme metal releases you guys should be keeping an eye out for. I think we got three of them today we want to cover. So with that, I'm going to, and actually all three bands, I actually went and checked them out before the call. Very, very good. One I've been listening to for years. The other two I've heard of, but this was my first time listening to them. So I'm really looking forward to what Carl has to say for all three of these. So I'll kick it over to him.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So I want to start with this band, Deconsecration. They're a band that I stumbled across a few days ago while I was kind of wandering around the internet, and I listened to them, and they're really cool, death doomy kind of a band out of Seattle. And I was really impressed that they basically put the album together in March, right when things are starting to go crazy out in the world. And here now, without any fanfare or hype, is this demo, 4 songs. It's just called Demo 2020, and the songs are Death Scars, Galvanized, Ghost, and Imploding Ascent. This band is a little bit mysterious to me. I think I mentioned that they're out of Seattle, but they only go by their first initials, each of the band members' names. There's 5 of them, and they just play this death metal with this growly, raspy voice that's just kind of below the other instruments, but their sound is tight and strong and dark. I really dug it, and I hope these guys get some listens and maybe even put out an album.
What I heard, again, you've listened to it much more than me. I just wanted to get a little flavor of it. The guitar riffs are murderously slow and massive. And I was like, that's what caught me first of all. And I think the overall feel, it's kind of raw. It's got an old school death metal feel to it, but it's much more doomy and sludgy than the old Florida stuff, right? That when most people consider old school death metal. I thought it was really good. I like the vocals too.
Yeah, the vocals were really, really cool. The kind of vocals that when you imitate them, you sound like you're just joking around, that kind of thing. But they really do. They really suit the music well. I really like the track Ghost. That's the one that stands out to me more than the others, but all 4 are great. And it only takes about 15 minutes to listen to this thing. So you could just kind of put it on in the car and just run around town and have this thing on and really get familiar with this new band.
Yeah. And the artwork is pretty cool too, which I kind of dug. And so everybody knows they do have a Bandcamp page. So it's deconsecration.bandcamp.com/releases. And you'll find it there. I'll drop the links to all of these Bandcamp pages in the description of the video below, so everybody can go check them out. But it looks like, you can pick this, you can stream it, download it. Looks like they're selling a cassette as well. $7 for a cassette, not too shabby. I don't think they're selling it on CD right now, but very cool.
But the cassette you can buy for $7, like you said, or you can download the demo for a name your own price. You could throw a couple bucks their way and help them, have money for the next round of pretty killer death metal. So that's kind of my discovery of the week, is this band Deconsecration. Hopefully we'll be able to catch them on the road one of these days.
One of these days, right?
Yeah. All right. So the next band is Carach Angren, and let me pull up their Bandcamp page. I've only been listening to these guys for a few years, and this is a band that this is their 6th album, and they're on Season of Mist, a really established label. And Carach Angren has a lot of really passionate fans, and one of the things that they do differently than other bands is they kind of rework fairy tales. And a lot of their albums kind of start with a once upon a timey kind of an opening, and then they go into pretty dark versions of fairy tales that explore different aspects of human life, particularly our tendency to be maybe destructive or rotten in certain ways. So it's pretty dark stuff. A couple albums ago, they did a theme about kind of a murderer. And then the last album, they did a theme about a little girl that kind of plays with a Ouija board. It kind of reminded me of The Exorcist a little bit. This one takes up a theme that has a lot of overtones with the Frankenstein story. The album is called Frankensteina Stratemontanus. I'm not saying that right, but that's close enough.
I know, I looked at it too, and I was like, all right, it's Frankenstein something, right?
It's not Frankenstein. Not Frankenstein, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, but this is a story that's that they're saying is one of the sources behind Mary Shelley's own thinking for her novel Frankenstein. I've read Frankenstein. I've read some of the source materials. I wasn't particularly familiar with this particular story, but kind of a parallel story to Victor Frankenstein, this desire to play God and to be able to develop life, kind of in a lab. And so that's the story, and interested people can look more about it online or Wikipedia or whatever, but I'm telling you, this is a really solid album from these guys. I mean, like I said, I've only been listening to them for a few years, but for me, this is far away the best album that I've heard by them so far. I've always thought they were good.
Big production values. Yeah, like lots of keyboards and.
Oh yeah.
Like I was telling Carl before we went on the air, it's like I was reminded, and they're not. I wouldn't really necessarily call them black metal. They're kind of like a black and death metal sort of hybrid, but with big cinematic soundscapes, and they kind of reminded me of Cradle of Filth a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable point.
Or even Flesh God Apocalypse. That's actually the band that I was kind of reaching for from Italy. They actually kind of have this big, bombastic kind of cinematic approach to extreme metal.
Oh, another great band, by the way, Flesh God Apocalypse. I saw them a couple of years ago here in Utah. They were fantastic.
Very good live. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, and also Carach Angren does a lot of symphonic samples in their music, or probably some kind of synthesized, orchestral bits and whatever. They sound great. Sometimes in symphonic metal, I feel like the symphonic parts are kind of intruding a little bit. You're really getting into a riff, and then all of a sudden there's this flute, but these guys really, they've got the balance right. And when they get heavy on this album, they really just are destructive. There's just some tracks on here that are just crushing in their overall weight. And I think they pulled off the kind of fairy tale aspect and the storytelling aspect that's really important to them really, really well. I would recommend this one just cover to cover, so to speak. It's hard to kind of listen to a little bit here, a little bit there with this band. You have to experience the whole thing.
Yeah, which I'm going to need to do. I mean, I just kind of sampled a few of the tracks. One thing I did notice, and maybe you can touch on this a little bit because you've heard the whole thing in depth. I heard lots of different vocal styles going on throughout the couple songs I listened to. Yeah. So if it's one singer, again, I don't know how many singers they have, or it's just the one, but he's using his voice in different ways, perhaps to play different characters from the storyline. But I thought that was really, really well done.
It really was. I agree. And I think they only have one singer, but they might have brought in some other voices for maybe like narrating the kind of introduction or different things. I'm not 100% sure what they did there. But yeah, I agree. They do some different vocal styles, but they don't do that alternating thing between clean and dirty that some bands do. When they're using the variety, they're using it strategically in ways that enhance the story, rather than just pulling this mood and this mood in different ways. If you're really gonna, if you're really interested in this album and you only want to listen to one or two tracks, I would recommend the title track for sure. That definitely will give you a feel for the album as a whole. And there's another really killer track called Monster that
I was just gonna say that's one of the ones I listened to. Yeah, that was quite good.
Yeah, really, really killer album. I wonder if they perform their whole albums on tour. I've never seen them live. I'd like to, but I can only hope that that's what they do, but I'm sure fans want to hear a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but this would be something really cool with like a video screen in the back, projecting some images related to the story, and then you're really just going nuts with the overall tale that they're weaving here. I think that'd be really, really neat. So.
And if you go to their Bandcamp page, and again, they are on Season of Mist, but on their Bandcamp page, you can buy the digital album. There's a CD digipack. There's a regular compact disc, I believe, in a jewel case. Then you got like various like T-shirt, vinyl combinations, or T-shirt CD combinations, that whole thing. And the album cover actually is pretty cool. So there's all sorts of different versions you can get there. So, and again, it's I'll spell it for you here, but it's going to be in the description below. It's CARACHANGREN.bandcamp.com. So we'll put that down below as well. So another very cool release. Very cool release. And we got one more. Carl's got one more for you.
We do have one more indeed. Well, I just couldn't pass up the new Abysmal Dawn. Their album Phylogenesis is really, really strong. And you said you've been listening to these guys for a while. And so what's been your general sense of this band over the years?
They are probably one of those like technical death metal bands from California that have been on the kind of precipice of making it.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's certain bands in tech death that everybody always kind of talks about, right? So you got Nile, and you've got Immolation and the Cannibal Corpse, so on and so forth. There's a few more. Abysmal Dawn have always been, I mean, the leader of the band, the guitar player and vocalist, Charles Elliott, works for Nuclear Blast Records, right? So it's like there's.
Right.
There's an it factor about those guys. They haven't quite made it up to that level yet, but I think they're close. And I have a few of their earlier albums. They're all really good, high quality. Hate Eternal's another band that comes to mind when you think about these guys. They kind of have that sound, very kind of precision technical death metal. And I listened to a few tracks off of Phylogenesis before, and it's really good. Very high quality here.
Oh yeah, it is great. And I really like this band. I've been listening to them for a few years as well. I saw them a couple years ago on a tour with Origin, and their set was amazing. I got to talk to Charles for just a few minutes. He's a really nice guy, really proficient guitar player. Like you said, he works for Nuclear Blast, really highly connected to the music scene out of California and probably around the world, honestly. I read that he recently opened up his own music recording studio, and that he's pursuing some of his own professional interests as a producer and so on. I'm pretty sure he was the one that did the producing and the mixing and so on this album. I'd have to double check to be sure of that, but this album sounds great. I mean, if he did all the work, like I said, this is a really good calling card for what this guy is able to do with the sound of this technical death metal, which can sometimes sound really blurred, but Abysmal Dawn's really clear, and all the different pieces really hold together really well. I was also impressed because I read that Abysmal Dawn, they recorded this album kind of in different patches because they were tired from a lot of touring. They weren't sure if the grind was worth all the trouble, and as they kept recording, they ultimately had some kind of lineup changes and shifted some things around, and they settled in, finished the album, and this is one of their best yet. I mean, I said that about Carach Angren, but I say that about Abysmal Dawn too. This knocks it out of the park, and it's got cool cover art, which is one of their staples.
I was just going to say, you beat me to it. Yeah, the cover art, their album covers are always really cool.
Oh, they are so stinking cool. And they just really capture the vibe of the music. And then when you go in and listen, for me, death metal like this, or technical death metal, whatever, but death is always the touchstone for me. I just think Death is one of the greatest bands. And Abysmal Dawn is going in a slightly different direction, but to me, they just are paying tribute to Death on every track. They love that sound. They take it in that more technical Death's approach. But if you do listen to this album, there is a cover version of Death's Flattening of Emotions on here, and it sounds great. You know, some bands should never be covered. And I would argue that Death is one of those bands. But if someone's going to cover Death, it might as well be Abysmal Dawn. And it sounds really great. So.
You know, you talked about before how Charles is setting up his own studio to do producing and whatnot. That's actually, it's funny because I mentioned Hate Eternal before, which I think a pretty good benchmark. If you really have never listened to Abysmal Dawn before and you like Hate Eternal, chances are you're going to like Abysmal Dawn. And, you know, Eric Rattan, the guitar player and vocalist from Hate Eternal, is also a producer.
Oh, no
and
way.
he actually, you know, after he, you know, was in Morbid Angel for a while and then, you know, got Hate Eternal going, he got his own studio. He started doing producing as well. So you got to wonder, Charles, who obviously probably has connections in the industry, right, thanks to his association with Nuclear Blast and torn with every band known to man, if he really decides to make like a side career out of producing and he's got his own studio, I wouldn't be too surprised if you don't start seeing Charles's name next to, you know, listed in the credits of a lot of extreme metal albums coming out in the not too distant future.
Yeah, you know, we were talking before about technical death metal bands and how a band like Abysmal Dawn is always on the cusp of just breaking out, you know. And for me, a go-to band is always Nile. Nile is one of my favorite technical death metal bands. One of the first technical death metal bands I saw live, and they just really sold me on that sound and that style. But when you listen to a band like Abysmal Dawn, they really give Nile a run for their money, and some fans might even like these guys and this style even better, because they just kill it with everything, track to track to track. And I would say the same thing about Nile, but Abysmal Dawn.
I love Nile. Nile is my favorite death metal band.
Oh yeah. That's awesome. Them. Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah. I've seen them so many times, and it's just like nostalgia for me. It's just like, oh, there's Nile again, you know. But if you've never discovered any of these bands, people that are watching this, you got to check out Nile, Abysmal Dawn, Hate Eternal, and others. There's lots of bands in this style, Origin and so on. So you ever seen Abysmal Dawn before?
I've never seen them live.
Oh yeah,
they played here in New York before. I haven't caught them though.
Okay, it's been so long since I've been to a show because of COVID and everything that I'm starting to feel like that was like a different lifetime, you know.
I just had the same conversation with someone yesterday. It's like we almost we can't remember. I honestly, when was the last show? I think the last show I saw was Kansas in December in New York City. And that was December. So that was 8 months ago.
I'm pretty sure my last show was Ozzy on I don't know which No More tours he's on, but it was one of the No More tours. And I think it was back in September, maybe a year ago, maybe more than that. But it was with Zakk Wylde on guitar, and it was pouring rain. And Zakk came out into the audience and just played in the rain, and that was kind of neat, you know, neat to see him just sort of getting wet, you know, alongside everybody else. And Ozzy was Ozzy, and he was great, and I don't have any regret about that. But seeing Sabbath on their end tour was a highlight of my life. But yeah,
mine as well. Yeah, that was special. Yeah, and it's funny because I don't think anybody really knows when we're going to be able to see live music again. I know, you know, you have some bands that are trying to play out there here and there. You hear, I mean, I read something about Great White recently, like the other day, like,
yeah,
what are these guys doing? Come on. It's like, haven't they gotten into enough problems already without doing this, right? It's like, man, Great White. But yeah, I to be honest, I don't anticipate any live music in my future for the remainder of this year.
No, me neither. I'd really like to see Carach Angren after enjoying this album as much as I have, and some of these others, and some of these bands that are getting older. I'd like to see them before they decide to retire, but I guess one day at a time with all this COVID stuff, you know. And
that's all we can do.
Fortunately, they're still putting out albums, and I feel like the industry is doing okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the smaller bands like the underground they're releasing stuff every day. It's a lot of the bigger bands who had albums planned that have been kind of holding off a little bit or pushing things back. So like we were, I did a show yesterday with Chris Allo, and we did a show on Iron Maiden, Deep Cut Dive with Iron Maiden. And it's been 5 years since that last Maiden album came out.
No way, really?
And it's like, we were both like, has it really been 5 years since the Book of Souls? I'm like, it can't be, but it's been 5 years. And, you know, Iron Maiden generally doesn't go that too long in between albums. So we were both like, they must have something ready to be released. And Chris was like, yeah, but with COVID-19, they may want to hold on to that until they know they can go tour with it. Because right now, if you're a big band like that, you can't release a new album unless you're going to tour it. So, I mean, it's
true. I once saw them under a full moon, and when they played Number of the Beast, it was kind of freaky. It was huge moon in the sky and clouds kind of surrounding it, and then on comes this classic song. It was pretty neat. And
yeah, you can't replicate that, right? That's
no,
a moment in time, right? That's just file it in the memory banks.
You know, that the first metal band I ever saw, and I've seen them every chance I could get, and they're gold. You know, Iron Maiden is one of the best of the best. And,
yeah, one of the best live bands ever, and you know, all those albums, just so many good ones. They're just a class act, and they're one of heavy metal's treasures. I think, you know, when we, you know, 20 years from now, when we're all really old and gray, I'm already kind of old and gray, but when I'm even older and grayer, we'll be looking back, and, you know, bands like Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and Iron Maiden are going to be considered like the kind of the godfathers of everything.
Oh, yeah.
If they aren't already considered that, but I think they definitely will be. So cool. So there you have 3 good releases to check out. So you got the brand new Abysmal Dawn, Carach Angren, and what was the third one's name?
Deconsecration.
Deconsecration. That's right. Yeah. So all good stuff. Check them out. Yeah, and we'll put like I said, we'll put the links to the Bandcamp pages in the description below, so you guys can check them out. You can check out Carl's reviews on seaoftranquility.org as well. And in fact, go visit us there at www.seaoftranquility.org. Check us out on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. So Carl will be back again in a couple of weeks with some more recommendations for brand new extreme metal releases that you guys should be checking out, so you don't want to miss that. So sound good, Carl? We got a plan?
Great to me. Sounds great. I'll look forward to seeing you again, Pete, and my reviews of these albums and more will be posted soon.
Sounds good. All right. Everybody take care. Have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow morning. For Carl Sederholm, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.